Welcome back to the Blue Chip Academy podcast, providing you with unique blueprints, tactical knowledge, and best practices to navigate the critical points in the elite sports ecosystem so athletes and parents can prepare a plan to a career path that any athlete can bank on. So today our guest, has a great deal of perspective and information coming from the elite sports journey. We have Laurel Springs student athlete manager, former head coach at Immaculata University for 9 years, and 4-year track and field cross country athlete at Westchester University. Excited to dive into this episode and discover new blueprints to achieve your goals. Let's welcome Alex Proctor.
Thanks, Justin. I appreciate you having me on.
Man, thanks for jumping on, man. This episode is obviously geared towards the elite sports ecosystem. You guys have a partnership at Laurel Springs, which is an elite high school, university, online campus where athletes can kind of tailor their specialized paths to have online education while they're chasing their dreams. A lot of athletes like Tiafoe this past weekend at the U.S. Open, and a lot of different athletes have come through there. So we'll dive into, everything that they have to offer and just how it fits in the elite sports ecosystem, because some of the platforms and the blueprints that they kind of provide for student athletes and families are just very innovative and very beneficial for those looking for it. I wish I had Laurel Springs at my back when I was coming through, because that was kind of the focus that I wanted. So considering someone like you, Alex, that has like an expert in everything, just in this whole talent acquisition process, going to college and then transitioning out of college, what's one critical piece of advice that you would give to an athlete looking to take the next step and pursue sports beyond high school?
Yeah, and Justin, that's a great question. And I have to say, I wish I had Laurel Springs or like this kind of blueprint when I was in school too. But, one of the biggest things that I think that I wish I knew, or I can just give to families and parents, is going to be, looking at your athletics and recognizing all the very valuable things you're gaining through being a competitive athlete. Now, obviously, your sports can take you to top ranked schools. It can get you to on a lot of teams. You get to meet a lot of different people, but recognizing like the leadership that you're gaining, the connections you're making at a young level, and how that can really help you in the future, launch your career, launch your sports career, launch your professional career, whatever it may be, because you just gain so much through sports. And not all of it is physical, right? A lot of it is emotional. A lot of it is mental. And I just really wish that, families would see that and recognize that. Young men and women would recognize what they're gaining, so they can, put a little tick mark next to it and say, wow, this is how I got this, and this is how it's going to help me in the future.
I love that answer, because when we talk about using sports as a catalyst to a career that you can bank on, we always hear about the different traits that athletes have that are transferable. But like, if you don't really understand what you're tagging on as you're going, there's a level of confidence that is missed as you're going through it. So it's like, if you're going through it, that you have confidence in your work ethic, you have confidence in your attention to detail, your processing skills, and you get the chance to kind of see the business in a certain type of way going through it, you do have an accelerated path to kind of your future or the plans that you want to focus on. But it's, again, having that wherewithal going through it. So we jumping into the recruiting process, with track and field. I was a track and field athlete and all that good stuff coming out of high school. And I always say that if I lived in the South, I might have considered running track in college. But what is the recruiting process exactly like in high school going to college? Is it just as simple as, hey, you run a certain time, these schools are going to go after you. You run this time, this level of school is going to come after you? Because basketball, football, some other sports, it's a range, right? Whether it's skill, talent, height, weight, speed, all those other different things. So talk to me a little bit about track.
Yeah. So, with track and field and even cross country, from a college coaching perspective, it's sometimes a little easier to narrow down your recruiting pool based upon, previous performances. Like if you're running a 9.98, or if you are, jumping 6.8 or something like that, it's much easier to say, yeah, I want this kid. They kind of fit the profile, or they're going to be competitive in our conference. But I'd say the other aspect is there are, for both men and women, as a college coach, you look at these athletes and say, okay, well, what can I do with you, right? How can I develop you? Because my job is to get you bigger, faster, stronger, throw farther, jump higher, jump longer, whatever it may be. So, I not only, looking at their current score, their current height, their current time, but looking at them and saying, how can I move them faster? So if I have a kid who is like, scrawny and he's running a 10 flat 100, well, I'm going to be able to grow him, develop him versus someone that maybe, I don't know, be fully mature and fully developed at 18, 19 years old. So we call that in the track and field, like training age versus actual age, right? So like a training age versus, the maturity or physical maturity of that student athlete. So that's another interesting piece about, track and field cross country that I don't think people always, realize, like, yeah, person's here, but I'm going to get them somewhere else. And do I have the ability to do that? Also, something that goes into that is like coachability, right? Coachability is so important when you're starting to work with track and field athletes, because, you're really, the track and field athlete is buying into your philosophy, right? Your training philosophy, which is going to be very different than somewhere they're coming from. And if they're not willing to buy into your training philosophy and work with the other men and women on your team, you might not get as much out of them as you would with somebody else.
That's a great point. And I like you touched a little bit more on the training age and the actual age, because I think we talk about a lot in a sport like football, where it's like the developmental time where it's like, all right, this guy might be small here, might be slow here, and there's just a lot of different variable factors. I just thought if a guy runs this, it's that, right? Whether I didn't know that really translated to track a little bit. So can you talk to me a little bit more about that training age and actual age?
Yeah. So if I'm looking at maybe a student athlete that competes in an event, maybe the 5,000 meter, so a distance event. Well, training age, if they've been repping 60 miles a week for the past 7 years, their training age is going to be probably like my age right now, right? Old. But,
right.
If you have a student athlete that is ripping off some fast times, and they might be doing a lower mileage regimen with some speed work in there, well, their training age is going to be a little bit lower. Or they just started track and field maybe in 9th or 10th grade, and they haven't been training that long. The potential there is going to be more once I get them in my athletic program, my training. Maybe I ramp up some miles with them, and maybe do some critical threshold work, and then they could actually get to that next level a little faster, or surpass that athlete that has the same time, coming into college.
That makes a great. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, we talk about in football, like, I'm not going to say the state, but there's a state down south that we say a lot of times the players that come there, they're really good, but sometimes they might be maxed out. Not all of them, not saying it, the big state of Texas, but just recruiting across the country, you might go to Florida, and the guy in Florida might have, like you said, like that training age might be a little lower, but that high ceiling or the different things, and get that good mix. Maybe in Georgia and California, you get the different things where talk about the resources and just the natural talent there. So to hear that in track is very interesting to me. And that goes along with just the whole process that we're talking about, because it's a developmental process, right? We talk about being a blue chip prospect or blue chip talent or desirable asset. And that's through the entire process and being committed to that growth along the way. So a major thing that happens in college football is size, right? You get there, everyone's kind of scrawny, you're playing against grown men. So in track, when you talk about the training philosophy, talk to me a little bit about that as well, because I know you can clash in the weight room with your strength and conditioning coach, but you have to lift weights to perform. And how's the training philosophy? Like, is that ever friction with players or with track athletes? I mean, do you train them all the same?
Yeah.
Or is it like, cause it's like, you're really just telling them, yo, run. And if you don't make the time, go back. I mean, I had a pretty tough track coach growing up, my pop. So what's up, man?
That's great. Yeah. And, when I talk about training philosophy, a lot of it comes down to, okay, so there's a lot of buy-in that actually has to happen. So when you're in high school track and field, you're racing, right? You're racing all the time. You're doing dual meets, tri meets, you're running invitationals on the weekends. Well, college track is completely different, and it's all a build up for that championship event. And there's so much training that actually happens throughout the year. You get these athletes like, well, why aren't we running fast? Why aren't we racing? Why am I doing this? Because I had success with my college coach high school coach doing this. And, it's kind of getting the kids to believe in you as a coach. And then honestly, as long as you develop that culture on your team, you have those strong upperclassmen that are like, hey, no, listen, coach knows what he's doing. And they hear it from that peer. then it's all good, when it comes to like training distance runners too, it gets really messy because we're not just ripping out long runs, miles, and things like that, and they're going to race poorly before they start racing better. So it's trying to get them over that tough hump of you know what, I didn't match my PR in high school yet, but we're only in February and we're peaking in May, and we got to get you to May. Have some faith. We'll taper you and get you over that mark.
That makes perfect sense. So it's like the having full trust, I guess, in that coach. Like that, again, I'm comparing it to the strength coach, because a lot of times that's where friction happens, and you're pushing your body. Certain times, like a coach can push you in the football field. A lot of times it's within the X's and O's. Like you're really pushed mentally, physically within the weight room. And I think in track, I ran track a little bit at Penn State, and track practice was a mental and physical warfare. Let's put it that way, and pull hamstrings and all those other different things. I just remember it's like, it's real training. And like, you have to trust like the philosophy of the person that's taking you through the different training, especially when you're have a chance of stepping on the track and getting smoked. That's
right.
That's a real piece.
Hopefully not, right?
No, but it's like I never really thought about the trust factor between a track athlete and the coach. Like, I mean, my dad was my track coach growing up, so there was a level of just innate trust. But just thinking when you get away from that, like it wasn't always the same with me and my strength and conditioning coaches, because I had that trust here. So it was like, all right, I know this worked. Here, I'm running a little slower, and I'm talking, little stuff with the 40 and things of that nature. But in track, it's essentially everything that you're going through.
That's everything. Yeah.
Yeah, man. So jumping into your background a little bit, and I know you were in track, we're talking about being a coach and all that good stuff. How was your recruiting process as a track athlete?
Oh man. It was a good experience for me. I have to say, I didn't know nearly as much as I probably should have. Making some decisions, going on college visits, they were always a blast. But, what I was looking for when I joined a college track program, I don't think I asked the right questions. Now, I would not take away from my college experience at all. I had a wonderful college experience, but I don't think I asked the right questions during that process. And I was just more excited to be on college campuses and checking out the teams, those men and women, the women's teams, right? But also, I didn't ask the right questions about training philosophy, or I didn't ask one thing I always tell my student athletes is to almost interview the coach back, right? Because I was just answering questions, saying yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am. But I did. I enjoyed the recruiting process. But looking back, I probably could have been a better advocate for myself.
I mean, you hit on some really critical points when you talk about going through the recruiting process, like interviewing the coach. We talk about this being the first step of the sports business process, and it's like a business. When you're going through a business dealing, like a recruiting scholarship is a business contract. And at the end of the day, you need to know who you're going to be working for, the culture that you're going to, what's expected of you, and all those different things. And that's one thing I felt like was my advantage going through the process, is like I kind of approached it like that. So I was like breaking stuff down, and like the conversations that we're having, we got into the weeds about different things, and I end up gaining a lot of confidence, right? My dad was the athletic director in high school, head coach. So like I had, a little bit of a background going through that, but we try to tell guys, like when I worked at Penn State, I'd be so surprised where it's just like, you got to ask the right questions, because you'll understand where you fit based on the different questions that you ask. And we typically identify recruits that way as well. When you're talking about like who has that growth mindset when they're coming in, it's like, all right, what are you going to do for me in this situation? How am I going to get better with this? How am I going to, it just frames them in a situation where it's like, oh, they're not just here for the fun. They're not here for, the girls or whatever the case may be, 110,000 people. It's like, oh, they really care about getting better at their craft. But some of those things, I mean, it's important to say, because you're saying at one point, a lot of guys don't ask the right questions, but and another recruiting tip is like asking those questions push you in a different light with coaches on how serious you take this game going through it. And it helps you along the way. And that's how we, put those pieces together. When did you start getting attention from colleges?
I started getting probably some letters at the end of my, summer between my sophomore and junior year. is when I started getting some letters. And these were, this is back in the day. I got like handwritten letters and some stuff from some different coaches. Obviously, the recruiting, like through online profiling, the things has changed drastically. But it started off pretty locally, and then I grew up in Lancaster County, so any of the colleges around that area kind of noticed that I had some potential. And then, towards the end of my junior year was when I really started to see that when you perform at like the state level, for example, the college coaches from at least around Pennsylvania are all standing at Shippensburg University where they hold states every year, and they're all hugging the fence lines. And then they send a letter to actually your school. So first day of school, senior year, I got like a few letters. It was pretty exciting. I'm like, what does this mean though? Let me get back in contact with them and see what this means.
Oh, that's awesome. Like, so thinking about the track and field, I mean, for you to get some attention in 10th grade, I'm assuming you were running pretty fast. Can you talk to us a little bit about your events and your times that got you?
So I got to say for track and field, I was a jack of all trades, a master of none. So I was actually recruited originally to some schools to be a decathlete because I could pretty much do it all. But I know it's probably hard to tell just from listening to the podcast. I'm not a big man. So then, when you get into college and you're throwing a 16-pound shot put when you're 145 pounds, that's throwing you a little more than you're throwing it. So, I could score a lot of points and I could do a lot of different things. It wasn't until my junior year when I started focusing more like on the middle distance. I was really blessed to have a wonderful high school coach, Jeff Bradley, who, he, saw that I was being stretched in a lot of directions just for, winning meets, getting points for the team. And he said, you know what, no, we're going to focus you a little more on this area when we need to. So I was pretty blessed to have he was a very accomplished runner too. And he was someone that I actually modeled a lot of my coaching after, because he always had the buy-in from the guys, cared about them. Because one thing that I didn't mention earlier when you're talking about track and field athletes is you can be physically gifted, you can be fast, but you're not going to perform if you're not in the right mental space. I mean, I'm sure it's like every other sport too, but
it's a little bit different. It's a little bit different in track.
I mean, you don't have as much time. You don't have as much time it's just you out there too. So I think of some of the other athletes I work with, like, our tennis athletes or golf athletes or gymnasts and things like that. And it's just you out there and you can't take a break. You never have a down moment, or you hopefully don't. So getting people in that right mental space is something that's important. And it's something that, I know my coach did for me in high school, and, something I tried to do when I was coaching at the college level or the high school level.
I love that you said again, the guys in the right space, and just to even judge athletes, right? I'm always about filling in the pixels and trying to understand like the athlete and what makes them tick. And when we evaluate football players, it's like they don't run track. It's like the first question is like, are you scared? Like, is there a level of competitiveness that you're not there? Because if you're not, you don't have to be a world-class sprinter for track to have an influence on your athletic career. So if you're not doing that to help yourself move forward and what you're saying is most important to you, why aren't you doing it? Are you afraid to lose? Because there is a level of being the big dog on campus when you play football, and it's very humbling to get smoked. A lot of people don't know, when I started running track, everybody's running past me. I was good on football field, but everybody's running past me. I was like, hold up. We got to get this right. It's a different level of humility that hits you in the face. And, in football, it's a confidence and bravado game. So having that balance, I always respected, the track and field athlete going through, just the process in general. But
so Justin, I have to share with you, I also played football a smidge in high school too. I was the kicker for all 3 years of varsity. So,
okay.
And, being a track and field athlete, we did have like a special play designed of like, side flick to the kicker and he runs it around. They never put it in the game, but I had full confidence with my speed at that time. I would have converted on that 2-point conversion. So, yeah.
For sure. I believe it. If you're the athlete, no one would be expecting it.
That's
So you
right. Yeah,
start,
it's, skinny guy running around the edge, right?
yeah. So you're getting recruited and all that good stuff. So what made you kind of decide on Westchester?
Yeah,
Or what did you base
actually,
your decision?
so
What did you base
I
your
really,
college decision on?
well, so first it was proximity. So I liked the environment it was in. It was one of the schools that I was interested in that was close to a major city, had a nice town feel. Also, had, potential major. So academics played the part, and also finances, I have to say. I'm a first generation college graduate from my family, other than my sister, but, we both were the first to go to college. So there was a finance piece that came into it, and also the coach. I did enjoy the coach. He showed a lot of confidence in me. However, I have to say, he was not the coach when I entered campus my freshman year. So there was a coaching transition
Oh,
in between that. So yeah, it was all good
that
though. It
happens.
was all good. Yeah, it
It's college
does, right? It
sports for
does
you.
happen. It does. Yeah, that's right. It's a business. It's a business, and I didn't recognize that. Being a high school athlete, I didn't see that side of it. I just used to my high school coach that was there for like 25 years or something. You know?
100%. That's a part of like when you talk about evaluating the coaches, like checking them out. Because even in football, or I mean, football, basketball, across sports, like you said, it's a business. If they're on the hot seat, the good hot seat or the bad hot seat, right? The good hot seat is that they're going to get another job and leave and go somewhere else, or the bad hot seat, they're going to get fired. So you got to, when you're asking these questions, being honest, like, all right, if this happens, what's going to happen? Because these are the dynamics that are happening in college sports in general. We talk about the transfer portal. I'm not sure how that affects track and all these different aspects, but NIL, and we'll touch a little bit on that a little later. But did you have a clue what you want to do after college in terms of professionally?
Yeah. So another hindsight 2020 moment. I didn't have a clue. I mean, I originally wanted to be in education. I stayed in education, which was great, but at a different level. But a lot of it really was kind of based around continuing to be around sports. So I wasn't talented enough to go anywhere, special afterwards. I wasn't going to be running professionally. I wasn't going to get signed by Nike or Brooks or anyone like that. But a lot of my decisions was based around wanting to continue to be around sports. So the path I saw that, was being involved in education. So I continued to coach somehow. That was the original plan, but it changed by the time my senior year came around. I'm like, I don't want to teach. Then I said, guess what? Maybe counseling's for me. So I ended up graduating, then going back to get my master's degree. But in that interim, I did everything, man. I worked as a financial advisor for the 08-09 period, which was not a good time to be a financial advisor. And I realized that
Yeah,
wasn't for me. Maybe I
that
should
wasn't them
maybe I should
years.
go back into education. It's a little less anger.
Hey, this is not what we're supposed to be doing right now. That's why I got
No.
drafted in '08, and that was like what was going on too. It was like, everybody hold on. I was like, oh, okay, yeah. It was, hindsight was pretty good, but yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Oh, that's
no,
funny.
that's
But yeah. Go
so
ahead,
you
Justin.
get no, okay. When you get to Westchester, was there ever a transition period? I know you say you went there because it was close. You didn't feel like you were going to go pro and all that, that route. So you were kind of focused on the school. How was that transition into Westchester?
So academically, I was pretty blessed to come from a good public high school, actually, that I felt academically prepared. So I was ready. I was ready for that piece. I'd say some of the biggest transitions really came down to actually training philosophy and what we were talking about earlier. Um, Running for a new program. The college cross country is cross country is the first sport that you're running. So you do cross, the indoor, and then outdoor track. And the distance that's raced at the college level is a lot farther too. So I got my
Oh,
butt kicked here, and then got some. Not by the guys on my team because we were in a transition year. I was one of the better guys on the course, but it was more like the races. They went from a 5K to an 8K, and I remember running in my first college cross country race, and I passed the 5K mark, and I may have said some expletives because I was like, oh man, I got 3K left. This is going to be painful. So, there was some struggle transitions with the sport. Also, I'm pretty social. I was pretty blessed to have some great teammates, some guys that I fit in right away with, some upperclassmen that were great too. I think being a 3-season athlete or being in a sport like football or basketball, where you guys are pretty much training all year round, like having a team, someone you're involved with, it's like, I always say, athletes never join really, fraternities or sororities because you have all your brothers and sisters right there with you when you move in. Sure. I was pretty blessed in a lot of ways, but man, that first race, I kicked my butt.
That was your welcome to college moment.
Yeah, that was my welcome to college moment. It was like, as people blow by me with 3K left on other teams, I'm like, this is not working out the way I thought it was going to.
That's odd though, man. I didn't know that there were different distances in high school to college. So you're like literally running a different race when you get there. So it's like playing a different game in basketball or something like that, or different goalposts, right? Like, I'm used to shooting on a 12-foot hoop.
Well, the weights and the shot and the disc go up. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you
the shot put, the weights, boom.
All that. Yeah. How do you recruit distance runners for that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, a lot of times like a good 5K runner will be able to transition over, but there are true distance runners that run cross country, and then there's people like me who are not a true distance runner who had a little more fast twitch muscle in there, and those guys with a little bit more fast twitch muscles in there. So my range was like an 800 to like a 3K on the track was my sweet spot. Okay. Guys like me, they struggled at that college cross country level. So, but there's those true distance guys that love the pain. They're just a glutton for it and can make the mileage transition pretty flawlessly.
I mean, that seems like a pretty major, like 3K seems like a pretty major adjustment to like go from high school dominating or doing whatever you're doing to like, all right, I got to stack up some more stamina and power to finish this off. How did you overcome that transition into college? Like specifically that?
Oh yeah. I would say actually my whole first season was a transition. Okay. And a lot of it also came down to like personal preparation. I had to recognize that I did not prepare over the summer as I should have. There was training that happened, but it was not the level in which I should have been training. So it's that reflection moment of, well, it's too late to change it now. I better work as hard as I can this season, and then remember that awful feeling I had at that 5K mark with 3K left to go. So next year that doesn't happen. Because there's so much that goes into the training over the summer months that you can't get after that passes. So you just have to remember that moving forward.
Okay, that definitely that makes sense. That definitely makes sense. So we jumping into it, like you said you felt prepared academically and all those different things. We talked about the adjustment physically and all that good stuff. Was there any, how was the adjustment off the track?
Off the track? It was good. I mean, it was good. It was good. I was ready to be on my own. Again, I think I owed that a lot to my parents who kind of prepared me. I wasn't coddled. Okay. I knew how to do a lot of things on my own. And, also being a first generation college student, I think sometimes you realize you're like, this is an opportunity. You better not screw this up. So I took everything seriously. So whether, Justin, Facebook came out my freshman year in college, right? So, when Facebook came out, everyone's sharing photos and stuff. And I got to say, our athletic department, they were like, don't get on that. Don't get on that. I don't want to see any pictures from whatever you guys are doing. So, we did have some good mentors, I would say, in our athletic department, and even some mentors that were upperclassmen. on our team. And I think with those mentors' help, that's what kind of made everything like a smoother transition than if I was just completely on my own.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, and I mean, they're definitely right. I know everybody when I was at Penn State, Facebook was like, "Hey, stay off of that," and all that good stuff. So that kind of brings us into just the time frame of how things have changed, because now they're like, get on Facebook, get on social media. So like even just balancing out the distractions now with NIL and everything going on. I mean, talk to me a little bit about that. How have you handled the NIL situation if you were coming out of high school, and what resources would you have looked for in a school and team for that matter?
I mean, in a school. Yeah, I would look for any information on it I could, and anyone that's given me knowledge about it. Now, track and field, I think, name, image, and likeness really comes forth to like a lot of those guys that are doing Olympic trials at Oregon and things like that. Like those are the guys that people want to see, want to do that. But, talking to Alex back in, 2004, I would have said, hey, well, why can't you do something like that? Why can't you use your name or in your image to make some money? Because man, what was it? $6 a day, $6 for breakfast, $8 for lunch, $12 for dinner. That's not cutting it, right? And when you're training and trying to work and do all these other things, it's tough. And there's a lot better ways to be able to get out there. So, I mean, as far as a school, I would have looked for someone that something that would have helped me make the most out of me and my college experience, and just help out. Yeah.
I mean, that's really what it's needed in NIL space, because it's just from these, you're seeing it now, like South Carolina, they put in pretty much a marketing department, an external marketing department. Now teams are starting to hire extra hands because just the operation of the NIL, building brands, doing the deal flow, all those good things take time, and you have to manage the players that are on the team and all those different things. So like with that being said, and I think track and field athletes, like you said, you got your top ones that people want to see, but like that, there's something about that individual sport where you can kind of highlight your personality. Obviously you have to perform at a certain ilk, but in college, like there's these closed ecosystems where you could be a star. You could be a star on Westchester's campus or at Penn State for that matter, and not be a star on the field. And there's just like cool opportunities that you can take advantage of. I mean, with these cool ecosystems just built around sport, you start finding out those monetization points. So I just always a fan of like the track athlete. We wear the sunglasses, the chains. It's like, oh, you can really highlight those guys.
Dude, I used to have long hair. I could have had some Flow product going. I don't know. I would have maybe shot for that Head and Shoulders view or something like that.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Oh man.
Got a quick LIG read here. 1 second. This episode of Blue Chip Academy podcast is brought to you by LIG Sports Group, executive sports consulting, mastering all the critical points in the sports ecosystem, starting from high school to college to the pros as well, from the executive level, helping find executive positions and using talent acquisition process that we use in this elite sports ecosystem. If you guys get any chance, check in. We'll have the link below this episode. Starting back in with the Blue Chip Academy podcast with Laurel Springs, Alex Proctor. All right, back at it. So, coaching at Immaculate University, like you talk about being an athlete, now you're student manager at Laurel Springs. So like putting the meeting between those two things, being a head coach, let's talk about that a little bit. Dealing with coaches on a regular basis. Yeah, dealing with coaches on a regular basis, it seems like there's always a specific time where they feel like it's their calling to be a coach. You mentioned it a little bit earlier, but like when did you have your moment where it's like, I'm going to be a coach?
So when I graduated, I actually jumped into as an assistant coach with a connection I made through running college, cross country, track and field. Him and I trained together a little bit. And he's like, hey, I got this position. I think you could really help with these kids. And I would have to say, like, probably after the first week, I was like, wow, coaching is much harder than I ever anticipated. But by the end of that season, to see the kids develop, and not only athletically, but like maturity wise, and seeing that change, I would say at the end of that first cross country season, recognizing the positive impact I was making with these young men and women's development, whether it was, athletically, but, even more so, with them as individuals. That's when I was like, I could do this. I can really do this and continue to make an impact. And I think this will be the best way for me to be able to make an impact on young men and women using my skills and my talent.
That's amazing just seeing where you fit in and you can have the most value. Because growing up as a coach's kid, I used to kind of feel the same way. I didn't want to be a coach, but I always enjoyed the talent acquisition process. Yeah, seriously, seeing the hours that they put in, and understanding that it's hard, or understanding that you're just explaining and they have to kind of go out and do, right? And there's you have to provide value and they have to provide value. So always love that developmental process, but always wanted to be supporting from the critical factors around it, the stuff that kind of gets missed, right? Because my dad was a coach and different things like that, but I used to always see those critical pieces around that were hit on board, which is we need more help around these different pieces. So that's when you get into the different ops and different things of that nature. It's my passion was I want to kind of support these coaches because they do play an important role. And then sometimes if things aren't right, things can come out, I don't say come out the wrong way, but just do a bad job of coaching or relaying information and different things like that. And they just have such a impact on athletes, right? Especially when you're going to college, guys are leaving their families, we're recruiting them, telling their parents they're going to send them away for 4 years. And it's just a very important piece to this whole ecosystem.
Well, Justin,
so take me to that transition.
Go
ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Oh, I was just going to say, that's such a great point because, when we're asking these kids to come to campus, particularly when you're working in sports that don't offer a lot of scholarships, you're also asking for a big investment, right? And it's a big investment for these families to send their kids somewhere for 4 years and then trust you to help them along the way. And I think, that was one of another favorite part about being a coach is being able to, help them, right? Help them get there and get some return on their investment because it's a big one, right?
Absolutely. We talk about it because there's certain things like that transition from an athlete to a coach is I think pretty hard, right? And a lot of times where guys might play a sport, it's hey, I can do this or I can do that. What were the main difficulties, seriously, from jumping from an athlete to a coach?
So, understanding how personalities fit within a structure. I would say that was one of the most challenging transitions because I was always someone that bought in, right? I bought into the training of whoever was training me. I was very trusting and had some faith. And the first time I got some pushback, I was like, whoa, wait, where's this coming from? I didn't realize how much, that pushback could happen. So I think one of the biggest transitions for me was okay, there's going to be pushback. And, how can I I don't know, sell it to them, but really get them to buy into me, have faith in me. And, that was one of the toughest transitions I would say is getting our college athletes to buy in, or the ones that didn't want to buy in, figuring out how to get them on board.
I would definitely agree that that's a hard thing for all coaches. We talk about talent management in football because that's a big piece of that, where it's just all right, you're coming in expecting to play. You're not playing because this guy's better. I told you you'd be great. And then it's how do you manage the personalities in that room? Does that guy become a cancer? Times 100, right? But dealing with athletes, I think you're dealing with athletes that are a little bit more me focused when you're talking about a track and field athlete. So just that, that comfortable coach to athlete relationship needs to definitely be on point. I always have a respect for head coaches just in general across all sports because they sit in a seat that a lot of people don't understand all the different things that are coming at them. And I hear it all the time. Well, they're not doing anything. Again, growing up as a coach kid, seen a lot of different things. Can you tell some of the listeners something that's very difficult for a high school or for a head coach to deal with that the general public or athletes may just have a hard time understanding?
Yeah, I think at least for me as a head coach, it would weigh heavily on me when our athletes didn't perform. And you gotta keep that positive look on your face, that positive encouragement. And it did weigh heavily on me when I didn't see improvements. And it's easy to say, well, they weren't doing this, or they weren't doing that, or they didn't buy in, or they didn't do this. But when I realize it's like, hold on, I can't control everything they do, but I can control everything I do and how I'm working with it. So what did I do wrong? And there's a lot of weight that falls on you when someone's not successful, when you come with that mindset. But I think that's one of the harder things. Also, I got to say, one of the hardest things as a coach sometimes is watching kids go and they graduate or they transition out to somewhere else. And again, you develop relationships with these kids over a long time period, and you get some really good ones. You're like, man, this is hard to watch them go. It is. It's exciting. It's what should happen, but you feel like your baby birds have flown the coop, right? And I don't know if the general public realizes like the very strong interpersonal relationships you get with these young men and women, because they're still 18 to 22, 23 years old, and you get excited about them, you get excited about their successes, and it's hard to reset every year and bring it back with the same energy and the same focus.
And especially when you talk about everything in the job is like getting buy-in, you're trying to motivate them, like believe in my philosophy, right? You seeing people like take it. It's like it's like raising a kid to an extent, or if through like very important years of their life, through that maturation process in their life, and it's I can definitely see that. I mean, I never thought about it until you said that, like because you see a lot of head coaches, they have to have that level of buy-in from an emotional standpoint, and on the other end, they have to be a CEO of the company, because at the end of the day, college sports isn't amateurism. So like on the other end, when you're dealing with the actual money, where wins and losses are matter, you have to balance like the emotion and the black and white stuff. And that's kind of, I just I have a heart for head coaches. That's why, at LIG Sports Group, we offer different consulting services when they do different stuff and building their staffs and those different things, so they can focus on their critical points, and we can kind of support in those areas coming through the whole sports ecosystem. So this episode is brought to you by Blue Chip Academy and Laurel Springs, with our partnership together, where I provide recruiting and NIL support to them. But Laurel Springs School is a private accredited online K-12 school prioritizing an education that works with the lifestyle and training schedules of the elite student athlete. With a mastery-based approach to learning, Laurel Springs was recently ranked one of top 5 online schools by Newsweek. So let's talk to me a little bit about how you get from coaching to a school like Laurel Springs.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it earlier, man. Coaching, it's long hours, it's a lot of time. It's just a lot. And I was getting my master's in counseling, and this position popped up. I get to work with student athletes, and I get to work with high school kids in their getting ready for college, right? And it's like, this is the absolute perfect job for me. I am like going in hard on it. And, they hired me, right? And I'm like, all right, this is awesome. I can do both things I love, education, work with kids, and then get them to college, make sure that they have all the tools ready for when they go to college. So that was like it was a simple transition. I was very blessed to be able to start working for Laurel Springs 5 years ago now.
Oh, wow. Congratulations on that. I got introduced by Laurel Springs, did some dealings with St. James, and I saw a press clipping that came out. It was like, Laurel Springs partners up with the St. James facility, and I'm a big fan of them and how they built that. The owners or the developers of that place it's just the sports ecosystem, the business, one of the nicest places out there. And when you guys partnered up with them from that educational standpoint, like I said, I've always been a fan using sports as a catalyst, and just finding out more about Laurel Springs and like the different athletes that went there, and just that mastery approach to what sports I think should look like if you're trying to take it to that level that you want to play at, or where it makes sense to have a capitalization plan on your process. So can you talk to me a little bit about the mission of Laurel Springs?
Oh yeah, I'd love to, Justin. So I can't talk about the mission without mentioning our founder, Marilyn Mosley. She started Laurel Springs like 31 years ago. And she had this idea that students' passions, students' desires outside the classroom, that school shouldn't get in the way of that. And really, that's what kind of launched our current mission, to be able to meet students where they're at, allow them to pursue their outside passions, and allowing school to help launch them into where they want to go in the future, whether that's professional, whether that's college, whether it's anything that they want to do. We want to meet the student where they're at to, again, help foster that inquiry and that growth. And that's what we do at Laurel Springs. We meet our students, and we don't make them choose between being a great dancer, being a great tennis athlete, being a great whatever, and being a great student. Like, that choice doesn't exist. It doesn't have to happen. You can do both. It has to look a little different, right? He's got to look a little different.
I love that you say that, because I just posted like a Kobe Bryant clip where he talks about you got to put all your eggs in one basket if you're going to do something that's difficult or that's kind of impossible. Whether you're going to the pros and being in the top 1%, accomplishing anything, extraordinary. And I used to get so annoyed growing up as an athlete, and like all the speakers would come and tell me about have a backup plan, have this, and like the percentages of what it means to make it to the pros. I'm just like, it's a huge business here. Like, I got to be getting something from what I'm doing here, and I got to be able to, put all my eggs in this basket, and that propel me forward. And I look at Laurel Springs as that type of place where you can kind of get the best of both worlds. Because what we talk about here is the acceleration plan, like not having a fallback plan, because to put the brakes on anything in elite sports is just not good. It's not safe, or whatever the case may be. But to have an acceleration plan, knowing that you're picking up the different information and things that are tailored towards you, whether it's like that specialized learning, specialized training, specialized acumen to deal with the things in the elite sports ecosystem, that's just something that I think, that's what's next up, right? With everything at NIL coming down and kind of transitions to high school. So let's dive into a little bit more about your role or chief responsibility at Laurel Springs. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I'm pretty blessed to work with an amazing team. So one of my big roles is working with the college counselors, who are all very talented, and just make sure they're up to date and understand the student athlete, right? Whether it's NCAA initial eligibility, recruiting, understanding the mindset of some of these elite athletes as they are working, to be the best that they can in their sport, and how their school can fit into that and work with them. Another big piece I do is I work with recruits, right? So I talk to families about recruiting plans, understanding, again, trying to give them all that information, all that knowledge that, I've accrued being an athlete and a coach, and now working with these student athletes, still say, these are the questions you ask. This is what you need to do in order to, have the best opportunity made available to them.
That's a perfect point. You're just like training, I'm not going to say mercenaries, but you're training elite athletes, right? To an extent, right? Like this into the business world, or just you're focusing your time like you're going to do at the next level, whether it's in college or as a professional. And a lot of things that I implemented at Penn State, a lot of things that I got through sport, I was placing those blocks in place as I was going through it. And I did feel like it was a competitive advantage, but like to have a whole system, I was blessed to have my dad be the head coach, him be the athletic director. And at my high school, Gateway High School in Pittsburgh, our principal at the time, Bill Short, what's up, Mr. Short, he was all in on, using sports as a catalyst as well, like the support around that. And that's kind of what I speak to, of just saying like, oh, when you have someone that's kind of super passionate about on the field product and everything about the business, and then someone like around them supporting all the different critical factors to make that happen, it's the same level of coaching, just those different critical pieces placed around. And that's how I look at like an institution like a Laurel Springs to be able to do that. So with that being said, how do you see Laurel Springs fitting into the elite sports ecosystem?
Yeah, it's a perfect marriage there, because there is nothing standing in your way from continuing and getting the most out of your sport. Laurel Springs, it's an asynchronous program. So you can go to school at any single point throughout the week. So, if you're an early riser and you want to go to school from like 7 to 9, train from 9 to 2, take a break, do another training session, and then go to school from like 6 to 9 in the evening, you can do that. Again, it's removing that roadblock out of your way that says, from 7 to 3, you have to sit in a seat and do this. And it's saying, no, you know what? You don't have to. You can go hit tennis balls for 3 hours. You can go run and then go lift and then do school around that. So it's really this asynchronous flexibility, why a lot of kids come to us, and then why we have so many student athletes that develop into such stars in their sport at all levels, whether it's, collegiate or pro, because they didn't have to make that choice or that sacrifice, which a lot of student athletes have to do. I mean, man, if someone would have told me back in 2000 that I didn't have to sit in a classroom and I could train and do all these other things, maybe I would have been a little better of an athlete. It's a really, really interesting setup that allows these kids to get the most out of everything while they're in school.
Yeah, I mean, it's a preparatory piece before you get to college, right? You have the schools like IMG, the Modern Days, and different things of that nature, like out there that kind of specialize in those areas. You guys have a partnership with IMG as well, where you provide them with academic support as well.
Yeah. I mean, we've been partnered with IMG now, and it's great because, again, they can use our asynchronous model for these kids to do additional trainings. They don't have to sit in a classroom for, I don't know, a French class, and they can do it with us online. So they can then also travel. I think that's one big thing that a lot of people don't understand, the amount of travel that takes with a lot of these sports. And,
right.
With Laurel Springs, you don't miss class time. We go with you. So if you get some downtime in the hotel room, you can hook up and you can do some Laurel Springs. You can do some math. You can do some of your coursework. Again, you're not missing out when you're doing these travels and these experiences that a lot of these elite student athletes need to be able to raise their universal tennis ranking, or get another star on that recruiting site. They're able to do that with still, again, getting a great education.
That's true specialized support there. I mean, to be able to kind of tailor the things around there and not miss a beat. We talk about it sometimes in recruiting world. We talk about 50-50 players. They care the same amount about the sport and academics. You got guys, some places it's like 90-10 players, it's 90 academics, or 90 sport, 10 academics, or the other way around, whatever the case may be. But to be able to go 100 at its, 50-50 at a place in high school is different, right? I think that's extremely cool. And it's not at a physical location. It's obviously online. So where's the value in online education?
One thing that you just said, like that balance, right? So our kids are learning how to balance their athletics with their academics. There's no one saying you have to sit in this seat and turn this in at this time. These kids are learning these invaluable skills well before a lot of their peers. And I've had a lot of college coaches when I'm at recruiting events or watching our kids, participate in sports. And then they come up and tell me, like, we really love Laurel Springs kids. And I'm like, well, why? And they're like, you know what? They always have their stuff together, whether it's for NCAA eligibility purposes, but also they get to college campus, they're mature. They understand what it takes to be successful. And they're learning to, be self-advocates, raising their hand, asking questions, speaking up for themselves, because, with this model, you need to be your own captain. And these kids already have practiced doing that before they get on a college campus, or even in the professional world, right? They're ready to go, understanding, what it takes to manage themselves.
I love that you said they get in they're captain of their career, because we talk about getting the captaincy in hitting the accelerator, because like there's a level of doing that. Like we say athletes do this, do that, but if you're not empowering the athlete to do it, it doesn't really matter, right? You talk about all the support sometimes in college. If an athlete, I mean, you can have 100 tutors and different things of that nature, and you can still cripple them when he's kind of out of school. But to empower an athlete to have the study habits, to have the wherewithal, time management skills in high school at that prime age, 13, 14, 15, 16, to take off, like you're creating a new floor, like for the athlete. So like I really loved it. I love to hear that. What sport do you see the most enrollment at, or just in a specialized curriculum?
Oh, yeah, I mean, bar none, it's tennis. So we have a ton of tennis athletes, and a lot of that has to do with the travel and the training schedules that have developed. A lot of our tennis athletes are training at an academy, and it's a specialized academy. They get dropped off in the morning. They do Laurel Springs, they train. They do Laurel Springs, they train. They get picked up in the afternoon, or they might live there, so they might have that experience as well. We're pretty fortunate to have a lot of really talented tennis athletes. And if you go on any big college roster, or you look at the U.S. Open, right, you'll see some of our Laurel Springs graduates there, right? But close seconds and thirds are golf, gymnastics. We've really started to grow in soccer. So thinking of that European academy model, a lot of it's being replicated here in the United States for these athletes. And again, Laurel Springs fits in. It fits around their training sessions. Provides them with, if they're not going pro, if they want to play in college, the NCAA core courses, the knowledge of our staff here at Laurel Springs to be able to help get them recruited, help get them on those college lists. So those would be some of the other sports, but by far, it's tennis is our number one.
I'm a big fan of tennis, and just like the way that I got a lot of tennis athletes, or just individual athlete driven sports, how they approach the game, right? Because you're kind of out there on your own, so it's like level of focus. Sometimes, that thing with coaching that gets me. It's like, all right, is the athlete bought in as much as I'll be bought in emotionally, right? Like just that tool of making sure how that all operates. But you guys said you not focused on tennis, but your highest enrollment was tennis and the different sports. What are your plans for integrating revenue generating sports like basketball and football into like the Laurel Springs ecosystem?
Yeah. I mean, so we've already started doing that a little with IMG, as you mentioned earlier. There's some athletes that are coming to us at a part-time basis. So we have a lot of students that come in, take 1 or 2 courses with us, and they have another educational entity that is what is considered their school of record, right? So where they're getting their meat and potatoes, and we're throwing in some side dishes with our education in our curriculum. But I think what I see from my standpoint, what would really need to happen is a change in how those revenue generating sports are actually producing athletes at the high school level. It still seems to me, at least, it's really heavily based upon these student athletes participating in either like a public or private school league of some sorts. And until they, if someone wants out there to specialize in something, Laurel Springs would probably be their best bet, because we are a turnkey school. We come with accreditations, we come with college counselors, teachers, everything they need and get a wonderful education along with it. So from my standpoint, if a revenue generating sport starts something like that, Laurel Springs would be a great partner to hop on board with.
That's a great point. And you just listening. I mean, entrepreneurs out there, are just people that are thinking about starting schools, educators, and that sports piece being a driving. I mean, we could talk about it's a driving revenue force in a lot of schools and education system or institutions. And in the high school space, if you do have a corner in the market where you can provide a level of, I mean, like you said, a turnkey accredited solution where you're top 5 in Newsweek, and having athletes gone through the process and have the success that they've had, I mean, Laurel Springs is definitely an option to kind of check out and look into. So, I mean, that is something that I think is very important for anyone that's thinking about starting school. Not that that's like a small hobby, but we were talking about just that opportunity to devise that specialized plan or add on to like a school and the other things that come along with that. I mean, the pandemic, we're still in it, and I know that's it's kind of online schooling and people being virtual. it makes it a little easier to, take in, more palatable. How has the pandemic helped or hurt Laurel Springs?
I mean, so it's fun. It's funny because it helped Laurel Springs. It boosted some of our enrollments um, over that time period. But I'd have to say it kind of hurt. It hurt in my mind a little bit because a lot of families, a lot of students got out there got an opportunity to do online school through their traditional school setting, and they think online school is what they were doing, sitting on a Zoom meeting, having a teacher talk at them, no interaction with your peers or anything like that. And I say it kind of hurt because that's not who Laurel Springs are. We are not this Zoom face to face, kind of poke your eyes out situation. Our courses are engaging. You can do them at your own pace. You don't have to sit in a chair for 50 minutes at a time and take attendance and things like that. So although it helped expose a lot more parents and students to the idea of online learning, I think it didn't help us in the sense that it's not who we are. It's not what we do.
Perfect.
On a personal note, though, I guess I did send my son to Laurel Springs for the pandemic year, so I got to see what it's like through a parent standpoint as well as an administrator standpoint. And I think I learned more in that year than I did any other full year at Laurel Springs. That's for sure.
I mean, it's so interesting just dealing with parents, dealing with recruits, and like going through the recruiting process, whether it's a parent that has played or gone through the process, or a parent that's gone through the process with a player that's a second child that's gone through the process. When we talk about these questions and everything, just being ready, it's kind of, that's kind of what you said. And it just gives another viewpoint on just the critical factors that you need to pay attention to, because you're going to look after your kid going through the process. I know you care about all the students, but it's obviously your kid, right? You always, like, how was it? What was going on? So
exactly.
That's incredible to hear. So we know that the landscape in college sports have shifted. We talked about the transfer portal, NIL, the different educational benefits and different things of that nature. How do you see Laurel Springs preparing their students to handle some of the new dynamics in college sports?
Yeah, and a big thing that we do is we try to educate. So being a school, right? We are educators across the board, and we try to educate all of our families about opportunities out there or something that's out there that they might not have known of. It's great. You mentioned earlier, like you have the parents that have two kids kind of close together. One kid already went through it, another kid's going through it now. But so many things can change from year to year, right? And that's one big thing that a lot of our parents really value about Laurel Springs is that we're offering these opportunities for education, providing workshops, webinars, one-on-one time with these students. Again, to be able to make sure that, they're preparing themselves or at least know what's out there in order to make the most of the opportunities that are presented to them.
Makes perfect sense. So what would be the ideal student profile for an athlete to attend Laurel Springs?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one reason we see a lot of success with our individual sports is, other than because of the nature of the training and you don't have to be on a high school team to, be recruited. Other than that is, you get out what you put into it. So I think an ideal profile of a student is a student that wants to get the most out of themselves. So, you put a lot of work into your education, you put a lot of work into yourself, you put a lot of work into your sport. It's that self-driven student that would be an ideal profile. We're not a one size fits all though, right? And I think that's part of our job as educators here at Laurel Springs is to, take those kids that maybe aren't getting the most out of themselves, putting the most into everything that they can and get them there, right? So go back to my coaching piece. How can I get you to buy in? Right. So there's that aspect of the job too. So, ideally we want these kids ready to work, ready to put everything they can into everything that they do. But if not, we want to teach them how to do that.
Perfect. Because my next question is I've been in different schools and understanding focus is a critical advantage, right? So being in a school and you're able to focus on your sport or just whatever the case may be, a level of focus is needed in high level sports regardless. Online environment provides that, but some people will argue that you're lacking social interaction with students outside of the sport, and it just can get too specialized. Can you talk to me about that? Like, and how does Laurel Springs have a solution for those parents that worry about the lack of socialization outside of the sport that they're playing?
Yeah. So, we have a plethora of socialization opportunities for these students, whether it's clubs, we have student government, we have field trips, we have service learning trips that these students can go on. There's not a level. The level in which a student can engage is up to the student. So if a student wants something and wants to engage, we provide all the opportunities for them to be able to do so. I think another really, really interesting thing that I saw with the development of my own son is, socialization looks very different than when us parents were younger, right? A while ago, I was walking past my son's room and he was yelling and hollering, playing a video game of some sorts. And I'm like, oh, who you're playing with? And he's like, oh, I was playing with so-and-so from Laurel Springs who lives up in Vermont. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And they're like, yeah, it's really fun hanging out. I'm like, is that hanging out? But I guess it is now, So I think that's a little tangent there, but I do think there's a lot of authentic socialization that happens. And then there's these organic connections that kind of trickle into the outside portion of our lives. It just looks differently than when I would ride my bike to my buddy's house.
That's a good point. Even when you talk about socialization and playing video games, I know a lot of guys out there in the recruiting world, I know your secrets, but they play video games with the guys when you can't communicate all the time. It's like, oh, add me, we can play, can talk on a thing, can't be tracked by the NCAA. But anyway, that is socialization, right? That's a level of communicating and building a relationship with people. Do it to get recruits and all that good stuff. So that's interesting. I never thought about that. If I'm in an online class with someone and we could play video games, it's essentially the same. When I was in the NFL, we got done, we go home, we all play Halo or Call of Duty and be on the same teams. It's like we're talking about what we talked about in practice. So all that good stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
That's a dynamic I didn't even think about. But where do you see Laurel Springs in the next 5 years?
And I see us continuing to develop in the athletic space. Again, we are a big percentage of college athletes, but there's a lot of effort to be able to capitalize on one of our strengths and how it really fits into this elite sports ecosystem, as you put it. I see us, continuing to grow, becoming not number 5, number 1 in the online education space. I mean, we have, we have the infrastructure and we have the people in place, and I think over time it's just really going to, come out naturally, right? We have a wonderful product, we have wonderful people, we have wonderful students, and it's just going to continue to build and grow.
Amazing, man. And that's all we have for you today. So I just want to thank you, Alex Proctor, for coming on to the Blue Chip Academy Blueprints of Success interview series and give us a lot of details and a lot of gems on just the elite sports ecosystem, sharing us about Laurel Springs, sharing us about the journey as a track athlete and as a head coach, and understanding those different things, understanding the training philosophy. I really love the training age. I'm taking that. So if you hear me say it, I don't think it's new, but I'm going to adopt it. But, you guys like and subscribe to this channel and visit Laurel Springs website in the link below. And check out, like I said, the mastery level curriculum for the elite athlete. And we're just talking about the different places and using a blueprint to kind of put you in a acceleration, put you in a captain seat for your acceleration plan. And Laurel Springs is definitely a place that lives by those same principles and puts the support around the athlete. And remember, check out Blue Chip Academy and the Football Business Masterclass, going through all the different intricacies of the recruiting process in football when you're just recruiting, whether it's your coach, the ecosystem that you're going into, the scheme fit, and all those different things. So when you guys get a chance, check that out. The link will be in the bottom of the bio. And that's it. We're signing out. Class is dismissed. And Alex, thank you so much for jumping on to Blue Chip Academy and all the success at Laurel Springs.
Yeah, thank you, Justin. It's been a lot of fun.